Hello and welcome back to Cliff Notes, the only history show you'll ever need. Human sacrifice, potentially the most unnerving aspect of ancient history. The mere thought of it being practiced is almost incomprehensible to us in the modern age. And yet, it happened, and so we might as well try and figure out why. What could possibly justify acts as these not only being institutionalized, but glorified to the masses? Maya was a civilization, more specifically a collection of city-states located in Mesoamerica from around 2000 BCE to 1539 CE. You might recognize them from their somewhat famous pyramids or their somewhat infamous calendar. The Mayan society was very heavily centered around farming, which, among other various factors, led to them often having a surplus of food. Having met this basic need, they were able to rapidly expand and evolve their culture and society into what would eventually become one of the most sophisticated societies in pre-settler North America. Not only did they have impressive architectural and astronomical skills, but they also had fascinating art, an incredibly robust writing system, a defined and rigid social structure, and a complex set of spiritual beliefs and rituals. As is the case with many ancient civilizations, religion was extremely important to the Maya. It was entrenched into almost every single aspect of daily life. This can partially be attributed to the fact that they were both polytheistic and animist. Many everyday actions, such as harvesting corn or making a trade, had some sort of connection to a unique god or deity. Because of this, the social and power structures of the Maya were almost completely inseparable from religion. This is most evident in the fact that rulers of city-states also acted as chief priests, but there are many less obvious examples as well. Power during this time was almost exclusively tied to one's perceived closeness or relatedness to gods. Thus, rulers had an inherent incentive to make themselves appear as entrenched in religious practices as possible. Now, these practices came in many shapes and forms. You have more standard things like prayers, chants, fasting, and feasting, but then you get to the other religious practices of the Maya, the least concerning of which being animal sacrifice. During the time of the ancient Maya, animals were raised for the sole purpose of being sacrificed in religious rituals.
In 2022, it was estimated that 99% of livestock in the United States was raised on factory farms. In 2017, the UK Environmental Agency found that 75% of megafarms in England had breached environmental regulations. In June of 2025, it was revealed that the number of factory farms in Europe had grown to 24,000.
Another common ritual for the Maya was bloodletting, also known as auto-sacrifice. This was most often performed via cutting or piercing of one's own tongue, ears, cheeks, or even genitals. There are even accounts of this being performed on a regular basis. Can you believe that a civilization as advanced and sophisticated as the Maya still had people intentionally harming themselves? And for what?
Between 2020 and 2022, emergency room admissions in the US for self-harm rose by 30% among girls aged 15 to 19 and 42% for girls aged 10 to 14. In May of 2024, a grant aimed to improve mental health resources in schools worth around $1 billion was discontinued by the US Department of Education. In 2023, 54% of LGBTQ youth reported self-harming within the past year. In June of 2025, the US Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration announced they would be shutting down the LGBTQ Youth Suicide and Crisis Lifeline.
And most harrowing of all, the ancient Maya even performed rituals of human sacrifice. And not just normal execution methods, like beheading or hanging. The Mayan were known to tie victims to stakes and shoot them with arrows, throw victims off cliffs into piles of stones, and even cut the heart out of victims while they were still alive and conscious. And who did they find the most desirable for these sacrifices? Children and nobles who were captured during war.
In December of 2023, it was reported that of the estimated 20,000 casualties caused by the genocide in Gaza, over 40% were children. In October of 2024, a report found that the Israeli military had killed more women and children in Gaza than any other conflict around the world in the past 2 decades. In September of 2025, the estimated number of casualties among children in Gaza reached almost 20,000.
And to think that everyone was just okay with this because it served some sort of higher purpose. As a matter of fact, there are murals and art pieces that depict Mayan gods and deities performing bloodletting on themselves that I can only assume were made to encourage people and glorify the act of bloodletting so that more people would do it.
During the making of the 1986 movie Top Gun, the U.S. Department of Defense provided the director and his team with billions of dollars worth of military equipment, including the use of Miramar Naval Air Station, 4 aircraft carriers, and about 24 F-14 Tomcats, F-5 Tigers, and A-4 Skyhawks, some flown by real Top Gun pilots. In turn, the Department of Defense was allowed to make changes to the script in order to depict the U.S. military more favorably. The year Top Gun released, the U.S. military recruitment rate rose by 500%.
In the end, I think we've learned that regardless of how advanced or sophisticated a civilization may be, rituals like these always seem to sneak themselves in there. If you like today's program, make sure to tune in next week when we take a more in-depth look at the social structure of the Maya. But until then, have a good one, and I'll see you next time on Cliff Notes, the only history show you'll ever